we got roll call, please.
Mr. Chair, before you do the roll call, we have one member of the commission who asked to come in remotely. We can't allow that until you all vote whether you're willing to let him do that.
All right, if I can get a motion.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we allow Pat Patterson to come in remotely for the December 19th PLDRC meeting.
Second.
So we have a motion to allow Mr. Patterson to come in remotely from Shelley, and second from Mr. Stoney. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Is he available? Are you on with us, Pat?
Yolanda, could you please monitor it and let us know if he comes in?
Okay.
Yes.
All right. If he comes in, let me know. We don't have any minutes to go over today, so we'll move on to the chair comments, and that is if you...
Mr. Chair, we still need to continue with the roll.
Oh, sorry. I thought we finished the roll call.
Member Craig?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Member Craig, they just called you.
Oh, here. Member Shelley?
Here.
Member Sixma? Member Patterson has not joined yet. Member Mills is absent. Member Costa?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping me on track. All right, so we have no minutes to go over, so we'll move to chair comments, and that is if you wish to speak on any subjects today, please fill out the form at the back of the room and hand it to Yolanda. We'll be limiting you to a 3-minute time limit. And quick question for legal, being that there's only 4, assuming that Pat doesn't join us, it requires a unanimous?
For variances.
For variances only? Okay, thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Storia for a legal comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for members of the public that decisions by this body on special exception cases and cases which rezone real property from one classification to another pursuant to the zoning ordinance are recommendations only to the County Council and do not constitute a final hearing. New evidence may be introduced at the County Council public hearing. Decisions on variances made by this body constitute final action subject to an appeal to the County Council. And what this means is that no new evidence may be presented at the time of the County Council public hearing on the appeal. An aggrieved party that appeals such a decision is confined to the record made before this body. Hearings by this body on rezonings, special exceptions, and variances are quasi-judicial in nature, meaning that this body is acting more like a court and must take into account all oral, written, or demonstrative evidence presented. Their decisions on these cases must be based on competent substantial evidence in the record, and competent substantial evidence has been defined as that evidence a reasonable mind would accept to support a conclusion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And then we'll move on to ex parte communications, and we'll start to my right.
None.
None.
And I have none. Do we have any items to be continued or withdrawn?
Yes, sir. We have one item. It's variance 25004. It did not meet due public notice, so we are requesting it to be heard at the January 16th public hearing.
I'll move to continue that item to the January 16th meeting.
So we have a motion on the floor to continue case V-25004 to the January 16th, 2025 meeting. And a second from Mr. Sixma, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, aye. Motion passes 4-0. Moving on to old business, unfinished business. You would read that to the record, please.
Yes, sir. Case number 024-24-005. Ordinance 2024-16, amending Chapter 72 of the Code of Ordinances to allow for shipping containers as accessory structures.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. And
Good morning.
This is a third edition of the proposed shipping container ordinance that was presented to you at the August 15th and then, August 15th, yes, and October 17th PLDRC hearing. At the last meeting, we had several discussions regarding placement of the solid waste containers, shipping containers on the agricultural zone property, as well as the number of them. So what I've done is gone through and amend the proposed ordinance to address some of those comments, and also added a comment. I was remiss in not including the agricultural zonings that are applicable in the Osteen local plan, and since the listed uses are the same as in all the other ag zonings as far as the explicit type of agricultural uses and permissions, I've included them in the ordinance as well. And just a reminder, this is something that was directed by council for staff to prepare and submit to them, and to address initially commercial and industrial zone property, and we've listed that. Then we got into, at the workshop meeting, putting on agricultural products, properties, because of the nature of ag land sometimes are using these structures. So we are adding this to the code as a permitted accessory structure and tied in with that. If I can direct you to page page 8 of the agenda item, item number 2, where some of the changes of the ordinance was that the shipping container would be allowed in conjunction with ag use on the specific agricultural lands indicated. Also referenced that they were permitted or properties classified by the property appraiser. They would be exempt from this code provision, except for they would have to meet the flood hazard management ordinance of the county, and also as directed by the commission at the last meeting, preparation of the number of units. So add a language that shipping containers shall be limited to 2 containers on property with a minimum parcel size of 2.5 acres, with 1 additional container per 5 acres of land, up to a maximum of 6 shipping containers per parcel. And beyond that, we have a clarification on page 9, this line 1. Previously, it was referenced as being a minimum 1 acre of uplands, and after discussion between a member of the public and the commission, that language has been changed to 1 acre of non-wetlands. And pretty much beyond that, there were a few little tweaks of the language, grammatical type stuff, but by and large, this is essentially the changes that were made in conjunction with our last public hearing. Be happy to address any comments or questions. The interim building official, Mr. Nick McClure, is here. I think there may be some questions about building permitting and location, so forth. So he is available to answer any of those questions if you have desire for that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ashley. Does anybody have any questions before I get started with questions? All good. First off, can I talk with the building official first?
Sure.
Nice badge, by the way.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nick Ventura, interim building official.
And congratulations on your new promotion.
Thank you.
Eventually, they'll update the website to show the same. So, give me, if you would please, give me an understanding of how does the Florida Building Code classify, or does it even classify or recognize these shipping containers?
Well, they're directly not written into the building code, but we would be taking them from their original designed use as a shipping container for transporting goods, and using it as a structure similar to like a shed or any other accessory building. So then it would need to meet the requirements of the Florida Building Code.
Okay. And so basically as if it were an accessory structure, a general accessory structure.
Yes, sir.
So that requires it then to be strapped down, tied down?
Yes, some means of a continuous load path, just like you would provide for like a shed that's a modular building that's built off site, that, and then set, because we're not, I guess, they're not going to be temporary, they're going to be permanent placement. So you would want some kind of tie downs to keep them from becoming mobile. I did print off some pictures from one of the most recent hurricanes, where a roll-off container, similar in weight to probably a 8 by 20 shipping container landed on the roof of a home in Palm Beach County.
And what about the requirement, while she's passing those out, what about the requirement of being on a concrete pad or stabilized structure as opposed to directly on the deck? Any references to that in the building code?
Well, there would have to be some kind of foundation, but similar to a shed, they have the built on like a skid, so that, and then set and anchored down, so they kind of have their permanent foundation kind of built with them. But since these were never intended to be technically used as a storage building or accessory building, they were for transporting goods.
Mm-hmm.
You probably would want some kind of solid foundation to set them on to keep them from settling or moving, and then anchor them down.
Okay, that's where you and I disagree, but that's okay. That's why you're in your position and I'm over here. The picture, this appears to be a tornado shot as opposed to a hurricane shot. And the differential between a roll-off container weighing at 2,500 pounds empty versus a shipping container at 9,800 pounds empty is a pretty substantial difference there.
Yeah.
But yeah, yes, could anything happen? Absolutely. I mean, we could be hit by a meteor tomorrow and stink for the dinosaurs, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Now back to Mr. Ashley. If anybody has any questions, please. This is a very, I like to run things loosely. Just go ahead and interrupt me. Don't wait for to be called out. I want to get clarification on page 8, which are the changes that were made, which we're getting closer, I think, to where I was hoping we would be. But I want to be sure that on page 8, that's paragraph 2, where you've added, in conjunction with agricultural use, I'm going to stop there. You list out all the zoning, and then you have or bona fide agricultural. So on that first sentence, are you referring to the quote-unquote hobby farms that we've discussed before? Is that what we're talking about there?
Well, right now, the potential to get an accessory or principal type of agricultural structure, either you have the classification issued by the property appraiser's office,
Right.
or we have the non-residential farm building affidavit,
Okay.
where you come in and tell us you have an existing operation and you're wanting to put a building up on the property or some structure in conjunction with that, and list out what's on site, what's the purpose for it, hay storage or equipment, what have you, and certify that, in accordance with the state statute, you have a farm. And then if we approve that, and often we do, because we looked at, double-checked there's their existing use, then you are exempt from a building permit under that process as well.
And that's outside of being a bona fide agricultural use, is that correct?
Right, because based on that, if you're already modified, you would have
Already
that,
have
but
that,
also
correct.
you get the classification. So if you come in and show us that you have an agricultural operation occurring or have the need for it, that's where the affidavit process that is conducted by staff, it's reviewed internally, and then when signed off, and then you're exempt from a building permit.
What are the criteria for that?
Well, checking what the existing agricultural use of the property. We can look at the aerials and, the information from the applicants. It is an affidavit. They're telling us that's what they're doing. We do have the fire and building review the permit as well for checking on that, what's being proposed. And if the information we receive or glean from available aerial or tax property information indicates that's what's occurring, then we will sign off.
Yeah.
And it's a rarity that they are denied.
Yeah, so this doesn't take care of the small farm that has, for instance, 3 cows as opposed to 5 for the bona fide ag, 20 some odd chickens, a litany of different animals on site. They are actually an agricultural use in a hobby farm situation. In other words, they're not selling to the general public. They would still not have that exemption or that classification that you just referred to. Is that right?
Right. It's just, just like if you have the ag property, if you don't have an agricultural use at all, then you go through the normal permitting process like for any other accessory structure.
Yeah, and that's where I have the problem with this whole ordinance, is that we're basically now taking a high percentage of the people that I represent in my district, being 3, that are not a bona fide ag, but are in fact in a, let's call it a hobby farm type of scenario, where these containers are already on site, and this passes, we put them directly in the crosshairs of code compliance, no doubt about it. And we're not talking one or two or three, we're talking several hundred. And I think this is it's a little bit of an overreach in my mind.
Okay.
Let's go to section, same paragraph as section A, which is the flood hazard management ordinance. Again, that seems a little heavy-handed to me as well. Can
You're
you?
talking about on page 10 or?
Yeah, I'm saying on page 8.
So 8,
Yeah.
okay, well, that's something,
8-2A.
okay. That is something we can't get out of. That's state statute. It doesn't matter if you have an ag exemption or not. Any structure that's placed in the under-year floodplain has to get a flood permit. So it has to be reviewed for that purpose and receive. It's not a building permit. It's another type of permit that is reviewed by our CRS coordinator, and I believe the building staff maybe as well, because of the flood hazard management ordinance requirement.
So any flood zone outside of X needs to go through this process.
Yes, sir.
So by definition in the chapter in section 72, so an accessory structure, and I'm quoting now, typically constitutes a minimal investment, not to be used for human habitation, or designed to have minimal flood damage potential. Based on that sentence right there, why are we putting them through this process? If it's not a loss of life, it's not a loss of, it's a minimal monetary value, but yet we're putting them through this whole process as if this was a dwelling. Am I missing something, or am I not understanding something?
Well, the requirement is based on statute, and I can defer to legal
Right.
on that.
So it's not just, it's the floodproofing criteria and this also applies to, even if you have an ag classification, your non-residential farm building on a farm is exempt from the building code. It is explicitly by statute not exempt from the floodplain requirements. So even that barn, that pole barn that a farmer constructs, needs to get a flood permit and needs to meet the structural criteria, which includes, meeting the base flood elevation, some flood proofing criteria, keeping things above where I forgot what the criteria is, but there's provisions in the adopted floodplain management provisions that apply to all accessory structures.
You're talking about putting floodgates, flopper gates inside these shipping containers, similar like you do with enclosed barns these days. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, so structures under 600 square feet can have the option, instead of being above the base flood elevation, they could put in flood vents to meet those requirements.
And in a hermetically sealed steel structure, which makes no sense. It kind of defeats the entire purpose of shipping containers. That's where I'm having trouble with this.
Yeah, but the flood requirements are also written into the building code, so it does say accessory structures do have to meet it, and like Paolo said, even a farm building on a farm is exempt from the Florida Building Code, but it's specifically not exempt from flood zone requirements, so it would still need to meet those.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for these folks? Any other discussion? Because I know I'm pretty much in the same boat that I was the last time we saw this, and my inclination is to continue this once again, because the other member of this panel that is not here today, who was also a very vocal on opposition and changes to this, is not here today to vote. Right. And it's not to the point where it's not in any form where I can accept it in its current form. This is my personal opinion. I don't know how the rest of you guys feel, but
One thing I want to ask Scott also is, maybe I overlooked it here, but is there going to be any stipulations on location where they're placed? I mean, you don't want them in front of somebody's house.
Yeah, that is not for the ag part. If you're gonna meet the ag provision that we just discussed, you're exempt from all the regulations other than the number and the floodplain issue. The other criteria that are listed in the rest of rest of page 8, 9, and 10, that would apply to those non-ag use properties and the commercial industrial. So you have to meet setbacks. You do have to be behind the principal structure
Okay.
and not in a landscape ease buffer and all these things that's expressed in the rest of the code.
Mr. Chair?
See people putting in their front yard, putting these things like, oh.
well, we've had that discussion as far as barns and stuff, especially when you're dealing with 5 and 10 acre parcels. That I mean, the front yard is basically pasture.
Right.
So, in the first series of classifications he has up here, the RCs through the OCR, you're going to have some of that is considered forward of the front-facing portion of the house, or mobile for that matter, just because of the nature of a farm. This is not in a residential section, and I think that would be the same criteria that we currently use with accessory structures that we see variances for all the time. You had a comment for me? Did you call me?
If you please, we have actually had a request from, I believe, one of the council members to move this on to council. So if it's okay with you all, could we please get a list of your specific comments that we could include in our agenda items so that the board is aware of your comments, but that we can get it to them to meet their request?
Can I ask who requested that?
I was just told in the hallway this morning that one of the board members had requested. I did not ask which one.
Did it
This
basically just
initially
be
did
pushed through?
come from the board,
Mm-hmm.
and they're looking to see it go there. It has been viewed by you all 3 times now.
Yep.
And we want to make sure and incorporate your concerns, but we also have to meet our requirements to get it moved on to the next level as well.
So we can move it with a recommendation of denial.
Yes, sir, that's your option.
Okay. All right. Before we get to that point, then, we do have an email here from a member of VCARD, basically contesting again the issue about the solid foundation.
May I just make a comment? It's from the executive director of VCARD.
Okay. Executive.
Yes, so
Okay.
it was a group decision.
Okay.
Right, and my concern is that they reference as
Clarify
a
that.
temporary structure, and it's not intended to be a temporary structure.
Understood.
And it was changed from the last review version where we had a specific on what type of foundation, and we changed it to just say a solid foundation. However, that may be addressed as through a building permit. Before it was asphalt, concrete. That was amended based on our discussion just to have some sort of solid foundation. So whatever that can mean under the building code is what our intent is. And like I said, to make sure it's set in place, is able to be anchored and not shift around. So I didn't have any I sent the information, I talked to them. I got that back earlier this week, but my concern is they reference being a temporary, and it is going to be a permanent set. If it was going to be temporary, we wouldn't even get into most of this. But as Ms. Smith said, if it's your desire to list up what the main concerns, it sounds like it's still more the agricultural property.
Yeah.
And the permitting. Like you've indicated, there's not much we can do about the flood hazard issue. That we're directed by state statute on that. So if there's any other element to this that you want us to incorporate, if you were to approve or deny and pass it on to council, here is the concerns or questions or maybe suggested modifications from the PLDRC. We certainly happy to include that in the agenda item to council.
Okay. A real quick question back for Nick. You said it was 600 square feet for the floodgates?
Yes, 600
That's your max.
square
That's your
feet.
max limit.
Yes.
So these containers are typically going to be 800. It's the 40 by 20, so they're about 800 square feet. So they're just over. Yeah, just that it doesn't. I get what you're saying. I understand the flood thing, but it makes no sense to have these containers cut into for that purpose. But okay. Yeah, I can give you a list of my concerns, and we can we'll go
Our
from
hope
there.
would that they would not be placed in the floodplain, but if they're on the agricultural property we'd be exempt from telling them where they place it. If they do put it in the floodplain, then that's the requirements for the flood hazard regulations are going to apply.
So you can remove that section, but we're still going to have to apply it, because this is just kind of, if someone reads our code and they're looking at all the requirements for the placement of these shipping containers, you know, we want them aware that, hey, there's this floodplain issue you're going to have to deal with, regardless of whether or not you have an ag classification or your property is zone agricultural, or you're even using it as a agricultural use. We have to make sure that accessory structure complies with the floodplain regardless.
And what Paulo brought up is an important issue, because recently a lot of people don't realize that in agricultural property they have to meet that, and since if they're exempt and they're putting the structure out there, they're kind of getting hit after the fact of that the land development code has the flood hazard management requirements, and when you find out about the structure, they're getting into a code compliance issue because you didn't get a flood permit. And that's not something that's highlighted really in the zoning ordinance, where we typically deal with the general permitting of things. So it was important to put that language in there to, even though you may be exempt, you need to be aware of this will affect you no matter what. And just like any other principal or accessory structure permissible by the ordinance.
Nobody from VCARD. Is there nobody to speak on the subject? And there's nobody here from VCARD either?
Yeah, I noticed that right off.
And I did pass a draft off to the citizen who was in the last two meetings, and I have not received any commentary from him since then.
All right. So, before we even call this for a motion, my two biggest issues are, number one, the fact that the requirement to have this on a solid foundation, being concrete or asphalt, becomes problematic for me. I think that putting it right on the deck is sufficient for these particular containers, and yes, they can become permanent, but in most cases these are temporary in the standpoint that they're there for possibly a year to 2 years. Some have been there forever, which become more of a permanent structure, and that we're not dealing with the situation of the units that are already out there, and now we're going to go back and pass this ordinance and try to enforce it retrospectively to all the containers that are out there, whether they were out there legally, illegally, however you want to look at it, but they're there. We have to acknowledge that they're there, and there's no provision there's no workaround for that. Secondly, the
Mr. Chair, before you leave that one,
yeah.
Instead of saying the wording that's in there now, what if we said on a stable surface?
Okay, well, and then that
Stabilized. Does that work?
stabilize in what fashion? What's a stabilized surface? Give me a definition.
So stable would work.
What's the definition? Depends on the definition of stable. I mean, I think the ground
building official?
on my farm is pretty stable to just drop it right on.
I think it would be
Suggest
something to prevent shifting and settling. I mean, that's the purpose of having it more than just plain on uncompacted ground. But I'm not a geotech. I don't know what type of compaction or
If you're on solid pasture ground,
That's what I'm saying, but the moment you call out for stabilized surface or stable surface, you're going to require, like you said, a compaction test. So we're adding layers of
yeah.
Bureaucracy.
yeah. for no reason. So that's one of my issues. Number two is the classification between, like I said, let's call them a hobby farm versus a modified agricultural use. I think that they are, while one is in the business of commercially selling product, the other one is in the business of primarily providing for either localized and or farmers market type units, which is wouldn't classify it as a bona fide agriculture. I think that they should be included in that exemption concern. Like on page 8, down when you get down to C and 1, where you've listed all the other classifications, including industrial, public, and business uses. There I don't foresee a problem having a lot of the teeth that this has apply to those particular scenarios, which I think that's what precipitated this entire process, was a commercial application that was trying to use a storage container on site. I think that's where this all came down from months ago. And so I don't see that as a problem there in a commercial environment, that yes, there you've got more of a public safety issue than you do on a individual plot of land or farmland. So those are my biggest concerns right there.
Mr. Chair, can I ask Scott a question?
Yeah.
Scott, on, I guess, page 8, lines 1 and 2, when it says shipping container used in conjunction with agricultural use, so we're not talking about a bona fide farm, is that intended to include hobby farms and
Well-
agricultural use on land classified as any,
Right.
as any
Well,
one?
if it's in conjunction with any agricultural use, whether it's commercial or not, I mean, it's the use of how, just general storage of it, on those particular zoning classification that makes it exempt.
I mean, can we just put in, after agricultural use, comma, including hobby farms? Do we even have a definition for hobby farms? But
We don't.
yeah, I mean, that's just kind of an example of an
Yep.
agricultural use
Mhm.
that is
Right.
not a bona fide farm. You
Right.
don't need your ag classification. It doesn't have to be for a commercial purpose.
Correct.
But it's still, I mean, that's why we have these agricultural uses and ag zonings that don't require that ag classification.
Well, you want it in conjunction with commercial or non-commercial agricultural use or on land.
I mean, is it required to be commercial when we talk about agricultural use in our definition?
Well, that's the extent, because in the rural classifications, you can have ag use, like keeping of animal, raising crop, but not for resale, so there's an intent
non-commercial
not
ag
for
use.
a commercial element.
Right.
Versus in agricultural, it allows for raising, packaging, processing the products you raise.
So we can
that-
clarify as that commercial or non-commercial agricultural use, including hobby farms, if you just want to be very specific and include that.
Well, I have no objection to including that. I mean, I guess we just have to come up with a definition or find what is the most common definition. I'm sure it's out there somewhere about hobby farms.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no objection to including that
Yeah.
language. That
Or
would
it's just
cover
covered
it.
under non-commercial agricultural
Yeah,
use.
something along that line.
I think with those couple of tweaks, kick it over to the council and let them bounce it around for a bit. So I think we've done everything we can at this point, at my end.
As a clarification, Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
we just want to go back to your first concern and make sure we're using the correct wording.
Yes.
Will it be solid or stable? Or delete?
As opposed to, so I would say stable, as opposed to solid, because stable indicates, in my mind, stable foundation would be, my pasture is pretty well packed down, it's pretty stable, as opposed to a solid foundation indicates now that you've got some kind of additional, whether it be aggregate, asphalt, concrete, I would consider that as a solid versus a stable. In other words, you don't want to sit it on soft sand, you don't want to sit it in the swamp, but if it's a dry patch of pasture, I think I would consider that to be stable ground.
So just to repeat then, we're going to address your first concern by putting the word stable in.
Stable.
We'll address your second concern about ag
Yes.
by including commercial and non-commercial. Do we want to include the word hobby farms?
If you have a definition for it, I mean, that's what I call it, because that's the best, that differentiates your bona fide ag from your mom and pop farm from your bona fide ag farm.
So I think we can just probably go with non-commercial agricultural use.
Right,
that-
we can probably, I would say, suggest a non-commercial, and then we could say, which is synonymous
Within
with
that
hobby
definition,
farm or
so,
something
okay.
like that, yeah.
Because I'm looking, the zonings that you've got lumped into that paragraph 2 are basically the ones I'm most concerned about. The ones down towards below are a little more more residential, rural residential than they are hobby farms. I mean, some of those folks are going to have gardens, but I doubt they're going to have hogs and chickens and pig and cows rather. But the first up top is my biggest focus at the moment, paragraph 2. So yeah, if we can include those, then you're getting closer to getting my approval. Yes. What else you got?
Just going back to the floodplain, I know you
Yes.
expressed that concern. However, that's something that we have to do by law regardless.
Yeah. That's a whole nother crawl that let me defer back. Can I get back to Nick for a minute, please? Let's talk about barns for a second before we talk about this. So what triggers the flood gates or the flood flaps on a barn? Is it the height of the barn? Is it the height off the deck? Is it the elevation? Is it just in general? What?
Yeah, so any structure placed in the floodplain would have to be 1 foot above base flood elevation.
Okay.
If not, there's that exemption. If it's 600 square feet or less, you have the other option of putting in the flood vents. Now, like an open pole barn doesn't have to meet those requirements because it's open, water flows in and out. But for an enclosed structure, that those are really the two options. You'd either have to elevate it 1 foot above base flood elevation. If it's less than 600 square feet, you would have the option to put in the flood vents.
So I'm out in the middle of a 40-acre pasture, and I am in AE zone. I would either have to bring that up a foot above BFE
Yes, sir.
to get away from.
Or if it was the smaller container, the 8 by 20, you'd have the option to leave it leave it below base flood, but put in flood vents.
So yeah, so if I'm out in the middle of pasture and I'm adding probably a foot to 2 foot to get it up to that point, now it's no longer a drive-in, drive-out if I'm storing hay in there, because now I'm having to make a ramp to get into the container and out of the container. Okay, I get you. And there's no workarounds on that.
No, because that's actually written into the Florida Building Code as well. So
Okay. All right. So as long as you're on X, you're fine. Anything outside of X, you're tied to a floodgate.
yes.
Okay. Well, that one I can't do much about once I get on the building code board. Anything else? No? Okay, well, I guess I'll entertain a motion if we got one.
Let me try this one.
Sure. Well, hang on, before you start,
Okay.
has Mr. Patterson joined us? No. Okay. All right, go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we forward ordinance 24-005. Oh, that's the case number. Ordinance 2024-16, amending Chapter 72 of the Code of Ordinances to the County Council with the recommendation of approval subject to the PLDRC comments. Does that work for you?
Or we'd have to name them.
Defer back to staff on that one.
Well, you're looking for changes to section 70, proposed section 72.310, B2 regarding the agricultural use, allowing for commercial or non-commercial ag sites, hobby farms, whatever language we can kind of craft to incorporate that idea. And then also you're looking at proposed subsection C, Roman numeral 4, on the foundation, change the shipping container shall be placed on a stable foundation to prevent shifting and settling.
So could Scott's comments just be incorporated into what you just.
Yeah, basically the four items that we've touched on will go as part of this package
That way she
forward.
doesn't have to repeat all of this.
Yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
I'll second her motion.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor,
That's my intent.
case O-24-005 to forward to the county council with a recommendation of approval with the multiple PLDRC comments, correct? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? I'm in favor. Aye, by the way. So that's 4-0. So send it to the council, let them kick it around for a bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. I'm
It
glad.
was grueling, but thank you.
Our best now.
Part of the process. Thank you, Nick.
Made some very good comments, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, appreciate those.
All right. Moving on. If you would read the next case, please.
Yes, sir. Case number V-25-005, variance to the minimum yard requirements on urban single-family residential R9 zoned property.
All right, and this is Ms. Harris.
Mr.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Harris. My bad.
The applicant is seeking after the fact.
You speak closer to the mic, please.
It's on.
Yeah.
The applicant is seeking after the fact variances to allow an existing wooden walkway and an elevated wood deck to remain in their current location. The variance 1 is to reduce the side yard from 7 feet to 0 feet for the deck. Variance 2 is to reduce the side yard from 7 feet to 0 feet for the walkway. The subject property is a narrow oceanfront lot and developed with a single-family residence built in 1973 and 2 detached garages. It is zoned urban single-family residential with an urban low-intensity future land use. The property is located within the coastal high hazard area, excuse me, and seaward up the coastal construction control line. The original deck and walkway were in place prior to the applicants purchasing the property in 1998, but were rebuilt in 2022 without obtaining the required permits after the hurricane damage. A notice of violation was issued requiring the applicant to resolve the issue. Staff recommendation is to approve variance 1 and 2 with conditions as it meets 3 of the 5 criteria. The applicant must apply for a building permit within 60 days of variance approval. Second, the applicant must remove the portion of the deck that is located off-site. I'm available for any questions you may have.
I have a quick question, Courtney. Did I hear you right? This is a rebuild after the hurricane,
Yes.
and that triggered the variances? All right.
Yes.
Anybody have any questions for staff?
Nope.
No questions for staff. Do we have, is the applicant present? Would you like to come forward? Please state your name and address for the record.
Chad Hoagie, 1902 Highway 382, LJ, Georgia.
All right, you've heard the staff comments. Do you have anything to add?
I'll only add that my mother has some mental health concerns that are resulted in this deck being built without a permit
Okay.
that I'm now working to resolve.
Okay. Perfect. So is it complete? The deck's now completed?
The deck is complete.
Just waiting to get your after the facts. Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
No.
None. Do we have any public participation? No. All right. Thank you. Since we have no public participation and there's no other questions, I will entertain a motion.
I'll be glad to make a motion
Please.
that we approve case number V-25-005, subject to the 2 staff recommendations.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor for case V-25-005 by Ms. Edith Shedley, seconded by Stoney Sixma. Any comments? Let's take a vote then. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Next case.
Yes, case number Z-24-016, rezoning from the prime agriculture A1 zoning classification to the transitional agriculture A4 zoning classification.
And this is Kristen Ray.
Good morning. So the applicant is requesting a rezoning of two 5-acre parcels from the prime agriculture A1 to the transitional agriculture A4 zoning classification. In 1971, the two parcels were combined and then were split sometime between 1976 and 1978. At the time of the split, the A1 had a minimum of 5 acres. In 1984, the lot area requirement increased to the 10 acres. Parcel 1 is located to the north, is developed with a single-family residence, and Parcel 2 is located on the south, is developed with a mobile home.
Did you get that on the screen? Please.
Thank you, Wanda.
Can you repeat that again, please, Court?
The Parcel 1 is located to the north, that northern square there, is developed with a single-family residence. And then Parcel 2 that is located located to the south there is developed with a mobile home.
Okay.
Lot sizes surrounding the subject properties range anywhere between 4 acres to 40 acres. Many of the adjacent parcels do meet the minimum lot size of the 10 acres. There is a 74-acre site approximately 341 feet to the west that was rezoned to A4. They already had an approved unrecorded subdivision, which made it a vested parcel. That rezoning allowed the applicant to kind of rearrange the parcels within the approved subdivision and allowed a transition between zoning classifications. The proposed A4 zoning has a minimum lot area of 2.5 acres. Both parcels are approximately 5 acres in size, with the which can then potentially be split into 4 2.5 acre parcels. The future land use for the property is rural, which allows a maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. A4 is conditionally compatible with the rural future land use designation based on the comprehensive plan matrix. However, splitting parcels 1 and 2 below the current 5 acres would not meet the density requirement for the rural future land use. The rezoning itself is not likely to create an impact upon environment or natural resources, and it's not anticipated to have an impact on public health, welfare, safety, or morals of the surrounding area. However, staff's recommendation is to forward rezoning to County Council for final action with the recommendation of denial due to being inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. I'm available for questions.
Any questions for staff?
What was the, did you say morals?
That's what or morals? Is that what you
I didn't know
said?
there's morals.
That's what I was going to, I was like, it won't affect the morals? Well, that's good to know. I don't know that
Good.
I don't remember
You want
hearing
bad
that in the
morals
code
out there.
before.
Yeah, it's one of the criteria for
No,
rezoning.
Okay, thank you. Tony's done.
Can we go to the screen that shows the existing zoning and then the proposed zoning page, please?
It's in our packet. I don't know.
Yes, there we
didn't
go.
put it
It's
up
in the
there.
yes.
I've seen it on the packet.
The reason I'm asking for this one here, so I'm looking at the current zoning. So this property is currently zoned A1, and I'm assuming that everything to the left of it is also A1. That's that parcel right there,
Yes, sir.
Right beside it. Yeah.
right beside it, and then you transition over into A4.
Correct. That's the rezoning. That's about 341 feet to the west.
Okay.
That 74-acre parcel, yes, sir.
And so, if these two parcels were actually combined as one, in other words, if it was a 10-acre parcel as opposed to two individual 5-acre parcels, would they be able to subdivide based on the what we passed recently? No?
No, what I'm hearing is it's a density issue. So
Density.
they're running into the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So the comprehensive plan has a maximum density which they can't meet if they divide it. So the thing about the comprehensive plan, it's it's essentially the Constitution in terms of growth.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot issue a development order that is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. Hence, the staff's recommendation for denial.
Okay.
because there's no comprehensive plan amendment traveling along with this. The only thing we can look at is the existing comp plan density limitations.
Got it.
So it's creating too many dwelling units. That's essentially.
Without a comp plan change.
Yes.
Okay, so, all right. Any other questions for staff? No. Is the applicant present? Yes. Your name and address for the record, please.
Linda Berry, 2088 and 2080.
Okay.
They a few years ago gave this second parcel another address. So
Okay.
they're two separate. When we bought this property in the
Can you get
early-
closer to the mic, please?
I'm sorry. When we bought this property in the early 90s, we were told it was a 10-acre parcel. I didn't figure out until the first tax period that it was two separate pieces, and been told all along that one of them, I think the back one, is counted as a non-conforming. Is that right? I'm old. So I'm hoping I'm understanding everything. So being the age we're at, mid-70s here, my husband and I, it's getting, we still do sell eggs and board some horses and do meet our ag requirements, okay, on the property, and the front and the back, and do pasture in both areas. But it's getting a lot of work for us, and we've had, I've been told all along I either need to combine it or change the zoning. I would like to change the zoning. We have family that would like to buy all or part of the front piece, which would be very helpful to us, of course, at our age. And so that's kind of what I'm aiming at, is to be able to do that. Now, you had said that, like the property right next door to us, you see the little line behind it. That's two separate pieces of property. The one that has
to
the
the
little
left,
curved line, I
the
think
left.
it's 7 acres and 3 or something like that. That's been there since we bought it. Always been two different people owning that. I don't know if that's A1 or not, but they've all that when we first moved out there was pasture and just, cows. And now, if you and looking at that down the road there, they've divided all that from 2.5 acres up to about 5 acres. That's even on the other side of the road. And I know they've done that to that A4 area too. So there is a precedence to even go down to like the 2 acres, 2.5, like half of that front property. That would just be very beneficial to us, and it would solve the non-conforming deal.
You heard what staff said about the not having a comp plan change amendment to go along with this.
Say it again, sir.
Staff mentioned it. Staff would repeat that for you. Would you repeat about the comp plan?
Oh,
So
geez.
Kirsten can explain better, but fundamentally, all development orders, including rezonings, must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Here, the comprehensive plan has a maximum density provision. So, doing a rezoning would create a situation that exceeds the maximum density limitations of the comprehensive plan.
But if
so
the
this
people right next door to us and the people just right down the street all have big houses now on 2.5 acres or 2 acres and 3 acres and that sort of thing, what is the difference?
The difference is that it's a zoning and a comp plan change issue, and you are currently zoned A1, which is what did we say, 5 acre minimum?
10.
No, it's a
10
10
acres,
acre.
10
That's
acres
the reason
minimum.
they say the others.
So that's why,
non-conforming.
and you're already splitting this down. Staff is recommending denial. And I'm going to point something out to you here real quickly, that we are 2 people down today for short two people, which means that you would need a unanimous decision from this panel to move this forward, or it dies for a year. So I'm giving you the option right now to ask for a continuance until we have a full staff, and at the same time to go back and do a little bit more homework with regards to how the comp plan may help your situation here. A comp plan change amendment may help this situation.
How do I do a comp plan?
Well, I'm not an attorney. That's why I would
I'm
suggest
saying
you
I would have
consult
to
the
get an
land use
attorney.
attorney.
Yeah.
This
Yep,
is getting
Yeah, so
terribly
that's-
expensive.
yeah.
Okay,
I would
so,
sug- mhm.
okay, so I've got to get an attorney
I
to
would
write up
sugge- I
that
would
we
suggest-
would like to have it divided eventually.
Yes, I would suggest that you consult somebody who is an expert in land use and subdivision. And first off, the first thing I would suggest is you ask for continuance from this board to move this forward to the January meeting, to
Okay.
give yourself some breathing room, because if it dies here, you're basically locked out from anything for at least a year, correct? Is that right?
If it gets denied, not by this board, but by county council,
By council?
because it's final action, then yes, they cannot reapply for another year.
Okay, so certainly then I would want a continuance.
Continuance.
What I'm not understanding is how, if right next door, they're on smaller properties and have, in fact, one guy is trying to do an Airbnb, which is not allowed, next door, and the other properties right there within sight are all smaller and have one big house on them or whatever.
If we're looking up at the map, okay?
Okay.
All right, so you're looking up at the map, talking to the properties to the left of your parcels or to the right of your parcel?
When I'm looking at it.
Yep.
Okay, to the left, the one that has the little loop down and shows two properties.
Uh-huh,
Okay.
right.
That one's, I think, 3 and 7 or something like that, I've been told. And then right next door, of course, they've divided it, and there's people building houses on those. And across the street, on down to the left, is a bunch of properties that they've divided. And there was a big pasture there that they've divided in anything. I think it was 2.5, and there were some that were 3. And then they had one guy on the corner that's been totally flooded out. That was a 5, I believe, as you make the curve on that road. So I'm not quite understanding why the density, we're not planning on putting a subdivision in there, and in fact, you couldn't. I mean, you could divide it as much as, divide that front piece in half, and the back piece has our home on it. It would never be divided. It's the way things are built. If we divided anything, it would just be that front piece.
Mr.
That's-
Chair, I can answer that question
ahead,
for you.
please.
There's several things going on here. One is the A1 zoning, which is now 1 home per 10 acres.
Right.
Historically, prior to 1984, I believe,
Out in the early
it
90s.
was a much smaller requirement. So you could, I think, 10,000 square feet. Whoa. Oh, sorry, 5 acres. So you were allowed to do that back then. That's one thing that's happening. So the older homes you see out there, they were allowed to do that at that time before.
These are all brand new homes.
And then the second issue that's going on is if you look at those smaller homes on that A4, and I think that's what you were talking about earlier, Mr.
Yep.
Costa.
Yep.
That is an old exempt subdivision. It was vested, so that's why they're allowed to do what they're doing. What this application is trying to do is take the current standard in order to subdivide. But we have the 1 to 10 acre requirement now. So even if everybody wanted to approve this, it's also against our subdivision regulations. So they'll come in for a subdivision and we'll have to deny that as well.
Correct.
Okay.
That's,
The parcel, the front parcel on Kicklighter, that's to the left, if you're looking to the left, that front parcel was just purchased, and it has a brand new home on it. So that isn't, I mean, maybe it was divided earlier, I don't know.
that was I'm assuming that was a non-conforming parcel. That's an assumption on my
We
part.
would have to research the
what I
specific
thought.
parcels to
It's
give you that
brand new,
answer.
beautiful home.
Yeah.
Across the street, on down to the left, where you see those divisions, okay, and on down farther, it was divided. It was a pasture that's been that way since we moved in. that was divided into anywhere from a 2.5 piece to they sold them at 2.5, 3, and I think a 5. There was like 4 or 5. They split it into like 4 or 5 pieces.
Are
They
you
all
referring?
had big, beautiful homes on them.
Are you referring to the bottom of the screen where it says the one side's labeled borrow pit, and the other one says sand pond? Is that you referring to that area? Or to the left, far left? Oh, the A3. Okay, that's a different zoning classification altogether. A3.
Yeah. So that, but they're divided into like 2.5 to 3 when they sold those off, and then the one on the corner where they make a turn that you can't see on this is a 5 acre.
Right.
Okay, so I don't know about older, that wasn't supposedly divided before, and they divided that, and the guy owned the stuff across the street too, so he divided some of that to be able to be putting houses on. And a lot of new houses out there.
Yep, you're dealing with three different, you got 2 different zoning, or 3 different zonings in there. You got A1, A4, and A3. Each one of them has a different requirement for lot size versus and home size for subdivision. So there's not, you're not looking at it from, it's not apples to apples, basically. So your apples to apples are everything on your A1 side, which is 1 per 10 acres, in which you obviously have 2 5-acre parcels currently, so you're quasi in that 10-acre arena. Again, if you would like for us to consider a motion to continue, I'd be more than happy to put that motion on the floor for you. Would you? Anybody? Somebody make the motion for her?
Just because I really, it's hard to
I think,
understand
yeah,
all this.
I think it'd be a little more, it'd behoove you to seek professional counsel on this one.
Right.
And it more than likely you'll probably get to the end of your means where you want to get to if you go that route.
Okay.
All right.
Otherwise, denial in a year.
Yeah, you get denial, and then you're just going to be
Refiling,
yeah.
Okay.
I'll
If I refile, I'm back to the same couple $1,000 fees.
Exactly. By continuing, you don't have to refile. You basically are continuing the motion.
We're on a fixed income here.
There you go.
And a
I'm
disabled
trying to steer
husband.
you right.
You got the date of January meeting?
At 19th.
19th, okay.
19th of January.
Is that good enough for staff, or should we give her to February?
It's January 16th.
16, thank you. I thought I heard 16. Okay.
15th or 16th?
16. Okay. I'm,
Go to. Well,
that would also give.
I would give her more time, yeah,
That would
because
give
the
you more time
holidays.
to
I'll
make
give you
some
till February.
And
Yep.
find out.
What's the date of February meeting, please?
February, oh, she's looking, sorry.
Feb 20?
February 20th.
Okay.
The day after my birthday.
Aw.
I expect
Oh, look at
some
that.
respect for
Could
that.
be a lucky day for you.
Okay.
I move that case number V-25-005 be continued to the February,
We're on Z20.
how am I reading the wrong one? Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Case number Z-24-016, now I forgot the date, February 16th?
20.
20th, okay. Be continued to our February 20th PLDRC meeting.
Second.
Motion on the floor to continue case Z-24-016 to the February 20th, 2025 meeting by Ms. Edith Shelley, and a second by Stony Sixma. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time. I appreciate
Yep.
it.
Good luck.
Anybody know a good lawyer? If you got names for me, I would appreciate it.
Moving on to the next case, and the final case. You ready to read that into the record?
Yes. Case number O-25-003, ordinance 2025-04, 04, update to the 5-year schedule of capital improvements for concurrency monitored public facilities, FY 2024-2025 through 2028-2029.
Again, this is Kristen Ray.
So this is the schedule of capital improvements. It's an annual requirement by the state of Florida to ensure that we're meeting the level of service requirements in the comprehensive plan. The county council is required to approve an ordinance for the concurrency monitored elements each year. We coordinated with parks, traffic engineering, development engineering, solid waste, utilities, and school district to collect the data. We reviewed the county council approved capital improvements plan for the fiscal year 2024 to 2025 through fiscal year 2028 to 2029. Found all concurrency monitored facilities currently meet the level of service standards. Our Public Works Department is working on some changes to the stormwater ordinance, which will be presented to the PLDRC in January. We do recommend forwarding the schedule to the County Council with a recommendation of approval, and are available for questions.
Any questions for staff? What's the total number? What's the total dollar amount here? Is there a particular page on that? I know everything is broken down by individual building or structure.
You will not see a total dollar number on that. That's only a small component of our budget.
Got it.
That has to do specifically with concurrency.
Okay.
It's not 15 pages, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
On page 51, talking about the airport barn, it says the facility is rented, and I was wondering who owns the facility. Is that relevant in any way?
So I can't really talk on the capital improvement plan projects that are located in the attachments, but I can get you the contact for the person that created that project, so you'd be able to ask the question.
I just found that section confusing, and I was just wondering, you know, with a $112,000 seems like a lot of rent for a year.
And when you're looking at this plan, this is already a board-approved plan.
Oh, it is? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Do we have any other comments from staff? I mean, from the panel. Please go ahead.
I'm not going to be able to find it now. The project, hold on a minute. The ATV park, has that already been?
What page?
I'm not finding it.
Okay. About the motocross park?
Yeah, the motocross park, thank you. Has that been approved?
I'll go back to staff. I believe so, but
If it's in the budget, if you saw an item in the budget, that has been approved.
So it's budgeted, but there's no location. So it's technically, it exists as an earmark, or it's just a budget exercise. So to accountants it exists, to everyone else it doesn't.
so the original location of over by the by the RC,
That's off the table. We
Off of
were
Mobile,
under
that's-
direct, yeah.
that's off the table, or is,
It's off the table. County council made a motion to not consider that particular
that
area
location?
and to look at other areas, including other areas in the landfill, but not in that
So
particular
okay, so there is a
location.
budget for it. Just the location is
Right.
what's in
Nothing has
question.
been decided on where it is or whether or not it's going to go. It's just been by when council approved the budget, they approved it with, an allocation for the motocross.
So they've earmarked X amount for this motocross park. Does that have a does that budgetary number, that allocation, does it have an expiration date? If not used by X, and it rolls back into the general fund, or?
That would be me speaking outside of my wheelhouse.
Okay.
So I can clarify. I can get with budget and finance and get you the answer.
Well, I'd be curious because they could take 5 years trying to locate find a location. In the meantime, that money is sitting there that could easily be better spent someplace else.
Potentially true.
Okay. All right.
They were going to put it on 415 by your house.
It was unfortunate. Well, it's not too far from my house, and I know that the landowners that were around this proposed area, he was none too happy about it. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't either. If
does
listen
get
to
loud.
motorcycles going, 12 days. It is a pet project. 12 days, 12 hours a day running motorcycles. But I think if you're able to find a place within the landfill property itself,
That's perfect.
the only ones that are going to complain are the buzzards at that point.
Well, at one time, years ago, they were going to try to put it by Tomoka Dump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
The landfill there. Yeah.
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 Be less impact, but
But then the last I heard, they were trying to put it across from the jail on Speedway Boulevard.
on Indian Mound Road or
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, right next to the strip club. They never built that one.
Mr. Chair,
Get a motion on the.
Yes, we're working on that. We're working towards that goal.
We're getting way off
All right,
here,
so
way off.
I will take a motion on this case if we're done discussing. Any other discussion? Any further discussion? No. All right, I'll take a motion.
I'll find that ordinance 2025-04 be forwarded to county council in concurrence.
For recommendation of, are we, okay. I'll second.
Where's our terminology here? So we are.
Find this concurrent.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor of case O-25-003 that we forward to the county council with a recommendation of concurrence. Is that correct?
Yes. I thought 04 though.
That's the ordinance number. It's
Okay,
case number
gotcha.
O-25-003.
Right. That's a recommendation.
Right. Any discussion on the motion?
But they're checking.
Oh, they're checking to make sure we got it right?
Yes.
Okay.
The motion is fine, you're just approving it for consistency with the comprehensive plan.
And adding the consistency with the comprehensive plan to the motion. Still a second?
Yes.
Yes. I'm the second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, so we are done with new business. Moving on to other public items.
No, sir.
Staff comments.
Just very quickly, I believe Yolanda left you each an application on your desk. March 31st, everybody's appointments are up. It's an odd year, so odd numbered year. So you all will be needing to reapply for your positions.
This can be submitted online, correct, or emailed back to you?
Yes,
Okay.
and we're early in the process. We just wanted to give it to you ahead
Oh,
of
it's
time.
early in the
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, 'cause I'm
So
looking at
this
it.
and the financial is due by what, February of next year?
Carissa Green would be in touch with you to provide all the.
Okay, so this is just informational. Got it. Okay. Any other staff comments?
Yes, sir.
Commission comments? Anyone? I have one. Thank you for making today go as flawless as potentially could with my first time behind this podium. So thank you for that.
Good question.
We had a few hiccups, but hey, we got through it. Short of that, I want to wish everybody on staff Merry Christmas, and everybody on the PLDRC as well. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And
And we'll see you next year.
I hope that Pat comes out through this well, and see him at our next meeting as well. Do we have a timeline on the missing chair position or missing member position?
We have asked the third floor to put that on the county council agenda to make an appointment.
Okay.
But
And
again,
that's-
they will have to reapply in March as well.
Okay. So that we just have the one vacancy, correct?
That's correct.
Appointed by the chair? Okay.
So they would be appointed, and Jeff's seat is going to be maybe one or two meetings if they didn't get reappointed. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Well, they
right
have
now
the
there's
right to
nobody
do an
in Jeff's seat.
application.
Yeah, oh, that's what I'm saying.
That's,
I
yeah, they
mean,
have
we
to
waited-
reappoint for January, I guess, to start. He could start.
He would start whenever, I mean, potentially you could have a situation where, the chair's appointment serves for a meeting, 2 meetings, and then have to get reappointed.
Reappointed.
that's a potential situation.
Okay.
It was just, I mean, we've been without one this long. It seemed like we were just starting.
Well, when
March or April.
where it hurts us is on meetings like this, where we're down to 4.
Yeah, yeah.
You know. Okay. And any press and citizen comments?
Al, it's the end of the year. You need to say something to us.
That's funny.
That's
It's always
it.
so quiet.
If we have nothing further, then this meeting is adjourned.